Motion to approve the minutes of the April 2nd, 2019 minutes.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I would here.
The first discussion item is the school district budget.
Good afternoon. I am Gloria Moore, and I am the Chief Financial Officer for the district. And I appreciate you all letting us come this afternoon to talk about our budget. I want you to know that we did make a few changes to the budget, the original one that was sent to you, but I have given the correct one to Ms. Brock. And we prepared this budget using information and projections from the budget adopted by the Ways and Means Committee. And as we know, it's always changing. The Senate is still working, so these numbers could change later on down in this process. Okay, the state main funding stream for school districts is the Education Finance Act, and this is a slide that just gives a history of the obligation for the state and what they've actually funded in the past 7 years. And this year, the obligation is $3,095, and the actual funding level is $2,485. This is our local revenue for the last 7 years, and you can see that the local revenue increased by $5.7 million and state reimbursements by 1.6. And so the previous slide showed, can you go to the next one? Next one? Yes, there. Thank you. Showed the increase in tax revenue over the last 7 years, but this slide shows the increase in the tax rate, or lack of it. In the years between 2014 and 2017, we saw the revenues increase, and there was no tax increase due to the growth in the value of the property in the county. And in 17-18, the increase in millage was a result of the reassessment in the county. This is the history of our fund balance, and we've been had a healthy fund balance for the last several years. Our district policy requires that we have a 20% fund balance. That's 20% of our previous year's expenditures. And at the end of this year, it is possible that we would not meet that requirement. Okay, our concerns for this budget year, there's the 4% mandated teacher increase and a 1% increase in employer contributions to retirement, and that's going to continue for the next 3 years. And as the salaries go up, the matching expenses go up too, the FICA Medicare and the workers' comp, and of course the retirement. In this budget, we have added 3 new mental health counselors at the request of our board. We're trying to have better coverage in the district, so we'll have 3 more in the coming up year. It makes sense that all of these things are related to personnel, because 89% of our budget is in our personnel. And this is just a picture that shows just how much of our budget is in salary and fringe. The darkest blue is actual salary, then the next color, the 26% is fringe, and that leaves us about 10.9% to fund all of the other expenses of the district. That's utilities, insurance, maintenance of our buildings, and all of the supplies that we need. Mr. Hamby is going to talk about how the district allocates personnel to the schools.
Okay, on the next slide, you see the Excel spreadsheet that I work with to give the schools their teachers. And this is, the top section is just classroom teachers in an elementary school. So we do it on a per pupil ratio. Our kindergarten ratio is 26 to 1. Our first, second, third grade ratio is 23 to 1. And in fourth and fifth, we have 26 to 1. So you can see across there the different schools, and what I do is just roll up their enrollment on the 45th day. If Northside has 117 kids in second grade, then I roll up 117 to the third grade, and then I figure out how many teachers they have. In the middle section, you can see the total for the current school year is the first column, and then skipping over the total that's bold is what I have allocated for them in the upcoming year, and then in between, you see the change column. So that's plus or minus or maintaining what the schools did as far as their homeroom sections in K through 5. The pre-K is down at the bottom. Every 20 students you see on the bottom under pre-K is one class and one teacher and one teaching assistant, because 20 is the max. So, for example, at James Brown, we have 3 pre-K classes. The PIP classes are our preschool intervention program. That's students with special needs who are not met the 5-year-old age threshold for kindergarten. 10 is the max, or 10 is the number we use in there. So a couple of our schools don't have those programs, but some have multiple programs. This does not include art, music, PE, media specialists, all those. I was just giving you the classroom teachers who are in there on a direct day-to-day with our students. And the next slide shows you how we do the middle and high. And we figure it same way. The ratio for middle school is 19 to 1. We bumped up the high school a little bit this year to 20.5 to 1. But what we do there is we go back several years and we do a trend factor. And so as you can see in the third column from the end on the top section, you see a trend factor of what we project to be promoted versus what we actually have show up the next year. So we compare what we project versus what shows up, and we get a plus or minus or almost a 0 with a trend factor. Just a little bit about it, you can see that in the West Oak area, we've had a negative trend factor. It's 4.56 at the high school. That's not a good thing for us, you know. So we're losing some of those students. Some do school choice, some move, some go other places. But what we estimate then is the total number of students, and it's just a simple divide it by 19 if you're a middle school, divide it by 20.5 if you're a high school. In the second set of columns, we have last year's allocation, this year's allocation, and the change. Seneca Middle School jumped up with 3.5 new positions because of growth and just the trend factor didn't really work out for them this past year when I figured it. But you can see how many we've gone up and how many we've gone down at different school levels throughout. If you notice the column, about the 4th or 5th column over, academic assistants, we have those positions at the elementary school that we divide up based on the number of GT students, the number of special needs students, and just a percentage of it is based on your total enrollment. Here at the middle school, they get 3 each because the Read to Succeed Act calls for remediation for kids who are not reading on grade level. Most specifically at grade 3, you got to retain them, but there's also legislation in there about grade 7 having that as well. So we have 3 of those positions for the middle schools. And again, this doesn't have all the other positions filled in, but we wanted to give you an idea about how we determine how many teachers are in each building, and that we do have one of the better ratios at that secondary level in the surrounding area, quite honestly. Questions about that part?
So, some of the limitations for this budget, we have a desire to maintain the tax rate as it is now and to have our revenues grow as the property values grow. This budget does include 89.8% personnel expenditures, so that makes it really hard for us to make cuts. We do want to stay at the 115.3 if we can. And then on the capital side, we have a plan that will maintain the debt service millage at 31 mills. And just as a reminder, the debt service millage generates the funds to repay our debt, and we incur debt to build new schools, renovate, repair, and maintain other buildings. So the borrowed money can't be used for our operational expenditures. So here's what you've been waiting for. So our local tax request is $48,290,555, and the state tax reimbursement would be $18,794,650 for a total of $67,085,205. This request, while more than the dollar amount of last year's request, is our attempt to maintain millage at its current level. we increased the local tax request by an amount that approximates the same mill value growth that was, we saw in the previous year, which is 1.16%. And the state tax reimbursements are only increased in Tier 3, and that comes from the state. That's not something that we control. This budget would leave us with a $2.9 million deficit in our general fund balance, so which would make our balance even more below our policy. So I did provide a summary sheet and detailed reports, and Ms. Brock has that. But I'd be happy to answer any questions if y'all have. I know you're in a bad place because you don't have anything to look at.
So the question I had for this year's budget, you're looking at 2.9. What did y'all use out of the fund balance last year to meet that?
Last
Was that
year,
1 point?
last year, you're talking about 17, 18 or the current year?
The current year. What's your
2.3, we're thinking, yeah.
And then your 20.
Including the one-time.
Right, includes a one-time transfer to the debt service fund.
Okay.
And can I just add, at the instruction of our school board, we do budget conservatively. And the way we do that every year, it's probably in the neighborhood of $400,000 to $500,000 a year. But Ms. Moore, in preparing next year's budget, she takes all of our current employees and she just adds 1 year to their experience and puts them in the same position for next school year, because at this point in the year, we can't really anticipate who we're going to hire and who's leaving. We know some of it, but we certainly don't know all of that. So we just take current employees, give them an extra year experience, and then put that salary into next year's budget. Well, every year, we're going to have some 30-year veterans who decide to retire, and we replace those with some rookies out of a local university somewhere. There's quite a pay gap between there. So I will tell you that 2.9 is probably worst case scenario. It's probably more likely to be in the 2.4 range. And that's also true for this year. That 2.3 that we're estimating for this year will probably come in. We always come in, I say always, in a typical year, we'll come in less than what we anticipate, because the board has asked us to budget conservatively so that we don't have, the opposite. It's much better to have that issue than the opposite issue.
So let's say the 2020 budget, if you have to draw out another $2 million, what's the board's financial thinking with that? If we're not keeping pace with.
Our intention is, as soon as millage is set in the fall, that the three of us would immediately start working with principals to identify a way to make that a neutral budget the next year. And then we would have to grow the budget to get back within our 20%. And the board they are accepting that as a way forward. Because we want to see exactly how much of that 2.3 we actually spend. There have been years where it's even been $1 million off. We may still be above 20% at the end of this year. It's just difficult to predict precisely at this time. And again, I don't think that 2.9 will be a full 2.9 because of the conservative budgeting that we do. So we've already identified some strategies that we'll start employing in September, this coming September, of working with principals to identify positions. I mean, that's essentially what we're going to have to do. We added those 2 allocation sheets into our budget presentation because that's really our budget. That's 90% of the money that we spend just on those allocations when we put employees in our schools. Maybe not. That's not counting what we have for maintenance and the district office positions, but really people make up 90% of our budget in salary and fringe. So that's what we anticipate having to adjust to get within the budget. I do want to just mention one other thing. The state legislature is, I think, trying to ward off concerns that many other states around our country they've experienced with teacher strikes and things like that because of teacher pay. And our legislature is being fairly aggressive with a 4% increase. I think, again, to ward off problems in South Carolina, our board has historically tried to match a teacher raise to other groups of employees in the district. That is reflected in this budget, giving all employees that same salary adjustment, so that, you know, cost of living, whatever you want to call it, that is for each employee in the school district. That is in the numbers that Ms. Moore presented to you.
What is that fund balance number? Is it 22 million? Is that what your want is? Not what it is, but what's your percentage that y'all are
It
wanting?
needs to be around 21 million, 22
Yeah.
million.
Okay.
I think we'll still be really close to 20, you know, in July when we finalize these numbers. Of course, it'll probably be in the fall where we know for sure after our audit's completed, but I feel like it's going to be closer to 20% than 19, actually.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, if I may, you mentioned 4% match for all employees. What is the policy decision behind that? Because I know we're talking about teacher strikes, not janitors or administrator strikes here. And that's what the legislature is focused on. I think their 4% was for teachers, and that's the core function, of public education, is to educate. And who does that? The teachers. Y'all support the teachers, as do the support staff positions. Why 4% on all employees?
Well, the only salaries that the state actually control within a school district are teacher salaries. So administrative salaries, custodial salaries, there is no state department guideline for those. Those are set by the districts. And, you know, that's just historically what our school board has expected us to do. Could we do something different? Absolutely. It's difficult to do that with, let's just take bus drivers and custodial. That's the lowest paid employees in our district. It's tough to call it a living wage, to be honest, when you look at you know, some of the lower years experience parts of that scale.
But that's on the low end.
Yes,
I'm
on the
not.
administrative side,
Yeah.
yes, we could
On
certainly.
the upper end is what because 4% of 6 figures is a lot more than 4% of
It is.
5 figures.
And the way I would answer that is, we look at like percentages of teacher salaries. If you look at the upper end of our teaching salary schedule, it's getting fairly high as
Yeah.
well. You know, you get up in the 70s. There are districts around us where you're in the 80s now with certain degrees and certain years experience as a teacher. If that gap between administrative pay and teacher pay continues to shrink, what's going to happen would be that administrators will say it's not worth the trouble. And also, the other thing that people don't realize often is that a teacher's salary schedule is 190 days, whereas a high school principal works 225? 235, sorry, it's elementary that's 225. So we have high school principals work almost a full, well, I guess it'd be closer to 2 months more than what a teacher works. So you have to calculate that into those salaries to be an apples to apples comparison. We could show, you know, daily rate of pay, and that would be a closer approximation to the difference between, say, a teacher pay and a principal pay. But when you factor in the extra days, it's not that much more.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to,
No, I understand.
y'all do a great job. That's what we
conversation.
hear. That's the elephant in the room.
It's a fair conversation, and we'll be happy to provide you some more information to give you a comparison between teacher pay and administrator pay, because I think what you'll see is, particularly for assistant principals, because, you know, it's typical that someone who aspires to be a school administrator would go from being a teacher to an assistant principal to a principal and maybe beyond there. When you look at the difference between a teacher's pay and an assistant principal's pay, when you look at the daily rate, it's not much at all.
Mm-hmm.
So there has to be some incentive to make that teacher want to become an assistant principal. And if you let that gap shrink by giving 4% to teachers and giving something less than that or nothing to administrators, you know, at some point, it becomes not worth pursuing.
Well, and I understand that. I haven't heard a lot about, you know, difficulty finding principals or administrators. The difficulty is getting the teachers. That's what I hear about. The people threatening to strike aren't the administrators or the principals, it's the teachers. And maybe there is that concern, but I just wanted to voice those concerns that my constituents are saying.
Sure, I certainly understand that. I would tell you that it is getting increasingly difficult to find, you know, quality candidates in multiple positions. Teaching is the one that's, I guess, acceptable to talk about and say, you know,
Right.
and people don't have a concern about that. There are positions where we've struggled to find the candidate pool for administrative positions as well.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
anyway.
Thank you.
And if you look at the percentage of that total salary increase that administrators make up, it's very small.
Yeah, okay.
One other concern, go ahead, I'm sorry.
If I could just add one thing, Mr. Hamby reminded me, and it is pertinent to the discussion. We do have to be competitive with neighboring districts.
Sure.
Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you we've lost a lot of administrators to Anderson or Greenville, but I can tell you that there is a district within easy driving distance of Oconee County, one of the Anderson districts, that pays assistant superintendents $30,000 more than we do. $30,000 more. I mean, if somebody applied for a job over there, it'd be hard for me to say, yeah, you really shouldn't do that. I mean, that's a lot of money. So we do have to look at our local districts. I'm not going to try to compare us to Richland, Lexington 5 or Charleston or anything like that, but I do have to compare us to Anderson, Pickens, Greenville, because people could live in Oconee and drive to those districts.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, one of the, when the Act 388 came in and we spoke about this the other day, it seemed like the whole goal of this was to lower the taxes on, you know, the homeowners for the first, I think it's 100,000, or I guess is that what it still is? But the state.
No, primary residence.
Primary residence, is it
Yeah.
all so it's the whole thing, okay. So, you know, but the state was supposed to be funding a certain portion of that back and still are continuing not to fund that, and that's kind of what you bring up here. So a lot of the budget shortfalls that we have and y'all seem to have exist within that, and we've spoken about that countless times. I know y'all have as well. What is the thought process behind some of the things that y'all have talked about with the legislators versus that on your budget?
Yeah. We don't experience the difficulty that many other school districts in our state experience, simply because our school-age population has been relatively flat for 50, 60 years. So we're still 10,500 students. Go look at Fort Mill if you've read any news stories from the school district up there. They have an impact fee now for and it's making its way through the courts to determine whether it's going to be allowed. But for every new residential construction, every new house, they're charging an $18,000 impact fee for the school district because they're growing by leaps and bounds. And Act 388, since those new houses contribute nothing to operational funding for the school district, they can't stay afloat. So while we do feel it, we don't feel it near as much as some other school districts in the state, because a good portion of our tax base is industrial. Of course, Duke Power is a main contributor, so that insulates us from the side effects of Act 388 more than in some school districts.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because we push a lot for economic development in here. That's one of the reasons why we do that. It does assist with education. It does assist with keeping people here. And we do a lot for economic development, and we need to do more to continue that. So I appreciate, bringing that up. So, and hopefully the state will continue to, help with funding on that.
Well, it looks like they're keeping the percentage of funding at the same, at 80.3%. They've just raised the bar on everybody. It's unfortunate. There really needs to be reform of Act 388.
they're looking at even changing the name of EFA,
Yeah.
which will make it very hard to track that percentage in the future. There's, it's kind of a shell game
Yeah.
to make it to where it'll be difficult for school districts to point that out in the future by changing some lines in the budget.
Well, and I certainly understand, you know, the competition y'all face in hiring good people and competing with other school districts and other, you know, other professions even. So, you know, I certainly take note of that and I appreciate the hard work you're doing. I'm sorry to see you're dipping again into fund balance, because that's, you know, if we can't increase the tax base at the same rate that the budget is increasing, then we're gonna have more tax increases.
Yeah.
So,
But as Mr. Hanvey alluded to, I'll tell anybody, if you take one of our high schools, and let's just make it easy and say we've got 1,000 students in our high school. If we apply our teacher allocation formula to that and tell the principal, okay, with 1,000 students, you get this many teachers. If you take that same school and move it over the lake into Pickens County, they're gonna get 2 or 3, 4 fewer teachers based on the way they allocate. So we do have a generous teacher allocation. And that's a good thing. That makes us be able to offer more courses to high school students. It puts fewer students in a class, making it, you know, easier for the teacher to reach those students when there are fewer of them in there. But we recognize too that may be a luxury that we may not be able to keep long term, at least to the degree that we've been able to over the last few years. So that's the discussions we're prepared to have anyway. And certainly that's not the one thing that we'll do. There are many things we'll consider. It's not just going to be reducing teachers. We're going to look at everything. You know, we'll look at administrative positions, at teacher positions, at clerical positions, whatever we need to. We can't cut bus driving positions because we've got to get our kids to school.
well, you're not gonna make up much money on that anyway.
We're gonna bring back the high schoolers driving the buses, though, that's right. That's what we need to, so, I appreciate all y'all do
thank y'all.
from a, you know, father of 2 students and, you know, graduating through Oconee County. Appreciate all that y'all do. It's a great school district. I think we're very, very blessed here.
And I want to say one last thing, that coming from District 1, which probably has the fewest students in the Oconee County schools, I know most people in District 1 really appreciate the job that Oconee County School District does for the kids. So thank you. Next on the agenda is the county budget discussion.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I put on each of y'all's desks in front of you a spreadsheet that looks like this. And Katie's put it up, thank you, on the screen. This, of course, however you want to orchestrate your meeting, Mr. Chairman, please do so. My main purpose in giving you all this document and saying what I'm going to say now is to hopefully get us to that point where we track the evolution of the budget in a parliamentary clean way, in a procedurally clean way, so that when we get to second reading, we know exactly what y'all are dealing with and voting on, and it's crystal clear, and hopefully after that, not much is done with it.
I think that's great.
So, if you look at the first column, this is what you all digested during our last budget committee meeting on the 2nd, and what you voted on.
I'm sorry, it's just,
He was wanting water.
I'm fine.
You're good.
Please
All right.
continue, sorry.
So,
Go
so the
outside.
first column represents what's in the budget now, and I'll call them the gross line items, obviously not in the department by department specific line items for each, but the total sums, both revenues and expenditures. And then the second column, we've titled Administrative Changes from 4.2 to 4.9, being what's happened during this last week. And we'll go over those real quickly after I go over the overall architecture of this spreadsheet and what we're seeing. And then, of course, this blank gap would be what you all do, the third column today. Anything that you want to make a change, either a change from the budget that's been given you or adding something out of the strategic plan numbers. And then fourth column, inadvertently, I had in my mind that we're meeting again next week on the 16th. We're not, so that would be the 23rd. That'll track additional changes on the 23rd, and then we have second reading on the 7th. So hopefully this document, I'm just doing this introduction, will help us track what happens, when it happens, and so we know what's coming out of budget, out of the budget committee in front of council. As y'all know, all 5 of you are here, but can't move and approve anything with the budget. You can only really have the discussions, make motions to send it to full council, so when you all are sitting as full council, you have it in a crystallized format, and hopefully this document will be that. My thoughts on, as I've talked to Ms. Price, talked to Amanda before she went out. Of course, for those who don't know, Amanda's in Washington, D.C. with a slew of 5th graders as a chaperone.
Please pray for her.
Yeah, so as many balls as she has to juggle, or ping pong balls she has to keep underwater here, I'm sure she'll be glad to return. Thinking about this, perhaps a good linear way to do it would be from the budget that you approved on the first reading, are there any questions? And then after that, are there any thoughts about changes? You can discuss those. Flowing from that, you could take the strategic plan, which you'll see starting on page 4 of this spreadsheet. That's that second half, I think, okay. And these are items that y'all brought up during the strategic plan, some of which have dollars associated with them. You can have those discussions, decide if you want to move those into the budget, and we can figure out how to do that, how to procedurally add that to the budget, either for second reading or just to crystallize it for your next committee workshop. From that, hopefully we'll have, from today, if we don't have any committee proposed amendments from today, at least we'll have, what direction you all are giving us to make things more clear for you, and whatever we need to do to make things good for the next budget committee meeting on the 23rd. It's good that we've kind of started this early. We've got a good schedule in front of us, so I think we have ample time to get everything. And I'm kind of leading this up because at this point, because I really just want to make sure that for the public, for y'all's sake, for everybody's sake, we're real clear on the numbers that we're doing and the amendments to those numbers, when those amendments are made, when they're voted on, and it tracks in a very transparent way as we get to second reading. That's that. I think that Ms. Price is here, and she's mastered the document, the budgetary document, so if you want to go with that, Mr. Chairman, just questions y'all may have had from what you voted on the first time, if you had more chance to digest it, maybe that's a way to lead off.
One question on the costs, this we want to include maybe in the strategic plan cost. Is it going to be a challenge to find that money and stay within the 49,218,959?
Do all of these?
Or do the ones that we've identified the cost on?
That's adding,
Yes.
6, 7, 8 million,
State or 9 million.
yeah, to the $49 million.
Right, but I guess I'm looking at the second column that says included in FY 2020 budget. It's got,
Oh, those things are already in
oh,
this
there,
general
okay, I
fund
misunderstood.
budget.
I misunderstood. I
Yes.
misunderstood.
Mhm.
Okay.
That 46,000 for the Seneca Library is for the roof,
Right.
and the 18,000 for the, review, the Brown Building, current and future use. There's 18,000 in there for the HVAC systems now, and those are in the facilities maintenance, department.
Okay, thank you.
And on the magistrate, would this be removing, I mean, we've got it funded from this year for the bond. I know we're struggling on locations. We've been working hard on that, to trying to find a location, but that would be removing it from a bonded project to a cash project?
Correct. The bond has not been actually pulled.
Right.
So, you could still go either way on that.
Okay,
The only thing that we're holding the funds for would be, the Bountyland Fire Station. We do have those funds from the 2015 taxable GO bond. That was short-term. But the Westminster Magistrate money, we don't have here. with
right.
us.
We set aside the
We can do it
bonding,
either
but
way.
we hadn't, yeah. So I mean, realistically, if you're, thinking about that, I mean, we can decide, I mean, whatever ends up being better.
Right, and the airport runway project is gonna be funded, by state and FAA
Right.
mostly.
So that $1 million on, and I apologize for not being present at the last meeting, I had another meeting I had to be at. This $1 million for the airport runway, that is not the Oconee County's responsibility. We would probably pay, what, 2.5% of that, or 2%?
I think the discussion's been 2 to 4,
Okay.
no more than, I think 4 was extremely high number, is that,
That's correct.
okay? So if you
So
were,
40,000 is what our obligation would be?
No, it's 2.5 cents on the dollar. State takes 2.5, Fed takes 95, and we take 2.5.
So 25,000?
I think there's some groundwork that has to be done that we would be responsible for
Okay.
before that could happen, but
So maybe professional services or something with a consultant? Okay. So I think that's what they're saying, Wayne, is there's some additional cost to getting it ready that isn't covered by
Well,
the grant?
Jeff's gonna apply for a grant for some of it. The big thing about the extension is up in the air is the moving of Shiloh Road. We already own all the land, but as we increase the runway, we gotta increase the glide slope.
The Technology Incubator relocation of Oconee Economic Alliance Office for $1.5 million. Do we have the details on that $1.5 million?
I do not. I think these, you wanna speak?
No, because I was just to say, I do not either. But, neither of us
I
know
think
that.
it's just
it's
an
estimated.
estimated.
The one time I know they were talking about maybe renting something, if we could get someone to renovate a building or something like that.
And there is some funds with the OEA that they've talked about as well as using that. I think the 1.5 was it's just another
That's,
rough estimation.
that's a
on it.
high water mark. I mean, I think that's worst case scenario. That is very expensive. In my discussions, the price per square foot, that was high, but, this is something that's vital to attract, to continue to bring Clemson into Oconee County. There's been a lot of discussion about them. They own a good bit of property over there in the Ravenel area, just basically beside where the Y Beach is, across Seneca Creek Road. And we know that they will be expanding over there. The idea, of course, is that they don't expand over here and then have all their students, their grad students and their undergrad students then move to Greenville or move to Silicon Valley or move to Research Triangle Park or one of those other myriad of technology development places that they actually make a home in Oconee County, and we keep continuing to focus on more high-tech jobs that have made places like our Research Triangle Park in Silicon Valley or Nashville or Austin very desirable places. We know that the upstate of South Carolina and the western upstate of South Carolina is an extremely desirable place to live from a quality of life. People are constantly moving here. I mean, it's a beautiful place. I'm not from here. I moved here. And we have to make sure that we have that pipeline open from Clemson to Oconee County. I really feel like that's important, not for next year, not for the year after, but for 10 or 20 years down the road. As we continue to see automation disrupt manufacturing, as people are moving, the studies are showing that electric vehicles will last 20 years versus a projected 8 to 10 of a regular automobile. These things are coming. It's going, and whether we believe it or not, or whether we want it or not, there's going to continue to be disruption in manufacturing at probably a higher rate than it is right now. And it's important that we look not 2 years down the road, but 10, 20, 30 years down the road. That's a big number, 1.5 million. I don't know that that would all be necessary, and I don't know that it's necessary that we put it in this year's budget. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention it and continue to encourage council to consider that investment in what I consider another infrastructure, part of our economic development infrastructure. Just like you need sewer, just like you need water and gas and roads, you also need a place for people to go, very smart people, much smarter than me, to go and develop ideas into what can be the next Google or Facebook or Uber or Tesla. And we have those people. Those people are at Clemson. We have MIT trained professors who are putting out students who are leaving and going to places like Boston and Austin and Silicon Valley. So the people are actually live, a lot of them in Oconee County or Anderson County or Greenville County or Pickens County. We need them to stay here and develop businesses here. And this is considered another industrial park, but for ideas. And that's, I'm sorry to take up so much time, Mr. Chairman, but
Right.
It's something that I think bears a lot of consideration by this council. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Well, it's observation here. I see, we put nothing for solid waste, no kind of looking to the future, so I guess we're gonna wait till the commode stops up and then we'll go to screaming and hollering. This is unbelievable, but okay.
Wayne, do you think we can get a number on the recycled glass? Do you think the best use is turn into a powder and integrating it into concrete and asphalt?
I gotta go to Myrtle, I gotta go to Horry County. I gotta deal with the Coast Guard first, and I gotta, Horry County, seemed like they gotta ask the guy. I got called down to the state recycling coordinator. Her whole conversation was, and I quote, "I feel the pain. I feel the pain." I said, I ain't down there kicking you yet, lady, but you're gonna tell me something. So talk to the Chinese guy down there. Well, Wally tells me, the State Development Board, he said, call Horry County. Call out of Horry County. I said, I understand you boys got a glass pulverizer. He said, yeah, we own a second one. I said, well, at first we wore it out. They pulverized everything. They put in foundations. They tumbled it, making glass mulch. They poured it in the concrete when they poured the concrete. And then his recycling program he's got out there, he says, we got we take the garbage in and sort it. I said, man, sort it, that's expensive. He said, no, it ain't. He said, use community service. I said, we ain't got it. He said, here's what we do. We got the sheriff on board, we got the judges on board. You come in there, say, caught me speeding or something. And, okay, you got so much community service, go pay the ticket. I said, I'll go ahead, community service. Okay, I'm gonna sort garbage. That's what I'm gonna do. All right, the judge is on board with this. You get caught shoplifting, community service. You got this, community service, community service. Okay, then they got another interesting thing out there. Say I'm on the dole. I can't work. I just can't find a job. Y'all give me some money, so on and so forth. Well, you got 20 hours of community service a week until you find a job. And I said, really? He said, yeah. You get up here. I carry around. I'll show you our whole recycling thing. I'll take you to see the sheriff. I'll take you to see the judges. I said, man, I'm in on this. So I got to go out there, and that's the county. And he told me one thing he's got a real problem with. He said, man, we get took to the cleaners, e-waste. We throw it into the garbage over here, send it over to Georgia. Georgia's going to pass, they got legislature, you look on their agenda, e-waste ban. So he said, we have to wrap that stuff up, put it on a pallet, pay to get it hauled over to Sally, South Carolina, it's down by North Air Force Base, at $400 a ton. It's got to be wrapped and stacked neatly on the pallet for them to take it. He said, man, we get to the cleaner, but that's the best we can do. So that's few things we need to think about.
When you go down to Horry County, ask them how much they paid for that crusher.
Okay.
Pulverizer.
Pulverizer, excuse me.
Yeah, they got the pulverizer, then they're going to a tumbler. Now, he said the sand that comes out the tumbler, that's what he said they put in driveways. That's sand. So the boy's got a good plan going.
We'll get prices on both of them, that will tell you.
I will.
Yeah.
As long as I don't get a speeding ticket, then I'll be sorting garbage.
We do have in the budget, it's page 58, 337,000 in addition. Now, some of that is obviously tipping fees, which is a concern to all of us because those numbers are going to continue to go up, and we all understand that. And I know Swain's brought up the recycling numbers and the higher percentages that they continue to be, and we continue to be one of the top in the state on recycling, and I think that, again, comes down to the effort and things that you've continued to push through. Hang on one second. And I agree with things that you're saying, but we need to get rid of the large stuff, which if you look under the tipping fees is $1.4 million, and that's gonna continue to go up. 10 years from now, that'll be $2 million. And then again, we talk about what happens when Homer, Georgia says no. So that's a real concern. So I do agree with the things that you're talking about. But if you look at what the 2019 budget was versus what it is now, there had to be some adjustments put in there because it wasn't, there were some issues in there, and you look at some positions and stuff in there as well.
Well, you got what's making our numbers look good, cardboard and papers up because of Amazon, eBay, and whatever, all that being shipped to us. So the cardboard's up, which makes our numbers look up. But what makes our numbers, the increase in tipping fees and stuff, is people are just hauling, well, heck with it, throw it in the trash, throw it in the trash, throw it in the trash. And that's why our tipping fees are more going across to Georgia. So we said, yeah, we're glowing, we're doing good. And the guy from Horry County said the same thing. He said, well, whenever your cardboard tonnage goes up and your paper tonnage goes up, it makes you look good. But you got to look at the bottom line. What is dragging you down? Glass is very heavy, and I was told here, oh, you can't grind anything that's had food or beverage in it. I said, what do y'all do out there? He said, grind it, everything. Throw it in there, grind it. And then the Chinese, I talked to Mrs. Yang. She's from Atlanta. That woman's got more energy I'll ever have. Sure, her day starts at 2 in the morning. I thought, I said, I can't keep up with you. She's a big grinder, industrial grinder over there. And, she's put me in touch with the Chinese delegations, various places. And, she said in China, there ain't no place to bury the junk no more. She said, we out of it. So she's got a plan, she's getting it translated into English for me, because I don't know what anything is. So they're going 100% recycling. I said, wait, how you gonna do that? And she spent, that's why I was the other day, I was involved with a meeting with her. She says, okay, anything we sort, but our labor costs are increasing so much in China. She says, we got the same thing as y'all got. We got all these health care issues and stuff like that, so labor's going up. There's no more cheap labor except for Vietnam, Thailand, and Laos. So they're using a mechanical sorting. And she said they come along, you got sensors. Sensor senses cardboard, flips it off. Senses paper, flips it off. She said when it gets on down the line, you get the plastic. Well, they got 2 sensors perfected now, and she said we're going to have them all perfected. Look at the plastic and flip two different grades off. She says that when they're trying now to have the bottles where they can actually use a light to identify the bottle the best they can and flip it off. And she said then everything else goes down the line to the incinerator. And now the incinerator, you take the heat, part of the heat from the incinerator, feed it back down the belt to heat the garbage and evaporate any water or moisture out of the garbage because you want it to burn. Going into the incinerator, we're generating steam. The steam is used for generating electricity. The product coming out of the incinerator is nothing but carbon. And in the plastics business, you've got a bunch of mixed colors. You throw carbon in there, carbon black in there, and turn the plastic black so you can pulverize it, reuse it. So she's told me that she's going to get me the plan.
Would Miss Yang be willing to come here for a fee to one of our meetings?
I'm gonna have a problem. See, I'm also working. There are certain things I can't say no more that I was gonna say because now I'm working for some of these people.
Well, would she be willing to come and speak to us at one of our meetings?
I can ask, that's all.
Okay. Or have Miss Brock call, and talk to her, cause sounds to me, I mean, what you're proposing is, like a waste to energy plant, which is, there's not a lot of them in the United States, but there is a lot of them overseas for that reason. And which it is something that we could consider. To me, that's something that you would have to be looking at with at least 2 other counties to have enough to do it. Which is, obviously they got trash too. So, but I would be interested, I know this is your meeting down there, but I would be interested if that, who Mr. McCall's speaking at would, come and speak to us even if it was just, by a call, together.
Absolutely.
And learn from her, whether it was face to face, that'd be great, but I understand she's in Atlanta, may not be able to, but just to learn and, she may not reveal all her plan, but some of the stuff you're talking about, I'm very interested in.
And we know, I mean, the whole group knows that we're gonna have a problem down the road if we don't do something.
When's our next, that'll be law enforcement? So, that's when we do solid waste. When's that next meeting?
Right here it's got, June the 18th.
Was it week after next? 15th is Monday.
No, this is June the 18th.
Oh, June. Oh. I can call, I talk to her all the time, so I can call her.
Yeah.
One of the other things is, yeah, we don't, to my knowledge, we don't charge municipalities any fee for dumping garbage into landfill. And I'm not suggesting that we do, but what I think is worth looking at is incentivizing them to provide recycling, not necessarily curbside, but make sure that they are recycling all of their goods.
Oh, they not, everything goes in the garbage. You're
I know.
100% right.
But if we have a way to turn one man's trash into another man's treasure, or at least reduce costs, then we ought to look at it. And I think once we have that plan of what to do with the glass, what to do with plastics, and what to do with everything else, maybe we can work with the municipalities and incentivize them to participate with us in our recycling endeavors.
Okay. Like the lady in Columbia said, you gotta feel the pain. She must have used that 10 times in one conversation.
Well, and I
We
think,
are feeling the pain to the tune of 4.36 mils in Oconee County. That's, what is that? $2.391 million.
That's very excessive.
Yeah.
We could do a lot better.
Any other discussion?
Are we supposed to be ranking these, Mr. Chairman, or anything? Or we,
I think the intent, from my understanding from Ms. Brock, was to look at these, sit down and talk about them over the next 2 weeks, bring back some questions that next, because we still have another budget meeting prior to any kind of second reading, and then there's still a week in between that budget meeting and the next. And was that next, the second reading was May 7th?
May 7th. So we have two weeks between the next budget committee meeting and second reading. Actually, we do have a budget committee meeting scheduled on the 7th, also right before second reading. That's difficult in my mind if we're going to make any substantive changes right before second reading. It'd be great if we got the meat of everything out between now and the next budget committee meeting on the 23rd. Can't always do that, but that would be great to keep things clean. But yeah, I think Ms. Brock's goal was to get the conversation moving, to see what things, like follow-up things, incubator costs, firming that up, solid waste numbers, what's in the budget, what needs to be fleshed out some more, incentivizing municipalities to recycle, things like this that would be charges from you all to us, that we could then make sure that we have in this document. And if you have things that we need to get clarification in column 1 items that have been already voted on to make sure our changes, and we can cover those now or whenever. But yeah, I think that's the main thing, probably the time well spent is that discussion on the strategic plan items, where they fall in your lines of priority. And then of course the capital equipment vehicle replacement issue, I'll just call it an issue. I don't know another term for it at this point, haven't looked at the numbers more in depth, because that's, I think $500,000 was set aside strategic plan, but for this year, to get the items that are noted as red or urgent by Mr. Beck, that is closer to $850,000 apart from roads and bridges, add another $950,000 for roads and bridges. 17, 18, 1.8 million. If you're gonna fund all of that equipment and vehicle replacement for this year, that's gonna have to be broken down obviously into some bite-sized chunks, and I don't know the best way to do that. I know Amanda's looking at that item, and I think she touched on that last time. In the back row, but I think she touched on it last time, talking about maybe spreading out the plan from 5 to 7 years perhaps, and maybe there's a different way that Mr. Beck could categorize these with some more categories from, as opposed to just red and black, dark red. Wheels are coming off to things of lesser priority, so you'll have something that's more doable. Just in my thoughts in passing, this is not my wheelhouse.
So just a clarification on the timeline, budget meeting on the 23rd, then we'd look at first reading on the 7th. If it's my opinion as chairman of the council, if we're going to even have a budget meeting on May 7th, that we would move second reading to either looking at having a meeting on the 14th or having second reading on May 21st, rather than try to do budget and that. That would be, I think that's a little bit more clear out there. There was talks of having a public hearing without having a third reading, as well. We had talked about that. And I think we were still staying with that plan on having a public hearing on the 4th, is that? And not a third, there's still not a third reading on that? What was that timeline?
So the way they slated it out was to have second reading on the 7th, a public hearing on the 21st, and then third on the 6th. So it was a separate day in which we've, I think every
Not
year
the
except for
6th.
last year.
June 6th?
Correct. 6/4.
6/4.
Did I say
There you
May?
go, you did,
I'm sorry.
yeah, 6/4.
Oh, 6/4, I'm sorry. June the 4th. So yeah, this schedule is more consistent with what we've done in the past with having a public hearing standalone. So obviously, if we wanted to finish up with this budget committee meeting, have the budget committee meeting on the 23rd, have still a fulsome budget committee meeting on the 7th without having to tinker with the actual second reading of the budget right afterwards, then we could push either to the 14th or to the 21st, second reading, alter our public hearing accordingly, so we're working off the numbers for the public hearing off of that second reading, so the public has a firm grasp of what really is the final product, barring something crazy. We've got time to do that.
And I know it's my intent, Mr. Chairman, to make sure second reading, there's not any changes unforeseen between the second and third.
Right.
So if council so wishes to do that, could we make that decision after the 23rd budget meeting to decide how we're gonna have that second reading? Because obviously we gotta give 24-hour notice whether we're not gonna have it, or we can or what would be your thoughts on that?
You certainly can, and I think that's probably a good way to approach it, because we'll see how things have crystallized after the 23rd, and then you can discuss, you essentially head up that roster. My main thing is to give the proper notice, which essentially is just the 24 hours. We do more than that. But yeah, if we can get it crystallized on the 23rd, whether we're in good shape or not for the 7th, or we want to push it out, that'd be a good time to do it. It'll give us plenty of advance notice.
Okay. Can I ask each committee member to rank the items on strategic plan and within the next 2 weeks, get them to Ms. Brock so she can formulate that and we can take a look at it at the next budget meeting?
Yep.
I have a question.
Sure.
Ms. Price, what was the budget last year?
The total budget was $47,608,784.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have just, with regard to this document, the strategic plan thing, if there's any of these that could be phased in over several years, I would be curious to know, which ones could be done over a period of multiple budget years. And I know some of these numbers are just, we don't have a number for them. But it seems like some of these things definitely could be phased in and some definitely couldn't be, but I don't know.
The last meeting. I would like to request, Mr. Beck here at the next meeting, talk about on vehicle replacement, so we kinda, that way if we
Yes.
got any questions on that, cause that's the flat can. It's not even been kicked anymore.
Right, agreed.
So, we did make a little bit of a commitment last year, but I guess, can y'all make that request to him? Okay. And anybody else? You think anybody from solid waste needs to be here, Mr. McCall? On the next budget meeting or anything?
You gotta feel the pain. Let me talk to that boy up in Myrtle Beach.
Okay,
Okay,
that's all I have.
anybody else got any comments?
Motion to adjourn?
Yep, motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor?
Aye.